We continue the questions. How does one develop aspiration, surrender? Could you formulate specific exercises or programs similar to exercises in physical education to develop muscles? Aspiration is a seeking, a felt need articulating itself to get what one does not have. What is desire at a lower level is aspiration at a higher level. A seeking to attain to or to obtain something what one does not have. And this aspiration has its own grades, ordinary, middling, and intense. And an intense aspiration is best described by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa as similar to the feeling of a fish which has been thrown out of water to get back to water. An aspiration is keen and intense when it burns somewhere at the lack of something. An intense seeking, an intense want, formulated. This is very important. A vague seeking is no aspiration. It has to be given a form to be effective. It has to be articulated. That is aspiration. It is likened to a flame in the Vedas. Agni burns on the altar of the heart. That is the flame of aspiration. Surrender is submission of one's will to the higher will. Each one of us has a will, and each one exercises that will according to how one is impelled by desire or whatever. But to learn to submit this personal will to the divine will or to the will of the higher self, that is surrender. By practice, your will is no longer there. It is only a spontaneous operation of the higher will. Naturally, both aspiration and surrender have to be stabilized by constant practice. It is essentially a psychological exercise, question of attitude, question of will. There can't be exercises similar to physical education because it is a physical operation. Constant practice. As far as aspiration is concerned, constant remembrance. Aspiration, it is described by the rishis, the flame, as the leader of the march, the captain of the journey, the call to the gods. That is aspiration. That deepens the more we cultivate it, the more we attend to it. If I pray, if I voice my aspiration during my meditation time or prayer time and resume it at the next session tomorrow, that's not the way to keep my aspiration alive. Every now and then, you have to resume the contact with that aspiration. A constant background of remembrance, of aspiration for God, for the Supreme, for the Divine. That has to be a cover, background cover for all the activities. Similarly, surrender. There are 100 occasions when we exercise our will. Each occasion is a time, a God-given time, occasion, to relate it to the higher will. To ask oneself, is this in tune with the divine will? Naturally, I am not sure. I can ask, can it be in tune with that? If I am sincere, if I am ready to follow the intuition, the inner guidance always shows the way. The mind may rush in to overrule the intuition. That's a question of sincerity. But utilizing each occasion, when you have to decide a thing, whether it is in tune with the higher will, that is the practice of surrender. Surrender starts with an attitude of submission, not exercising your individual will. It's a question of practice. But once the practice is established, it goes on spontaneously operating, and one does not need to halt and ask. There is a kind of barometer indicating yes, no, and you follow it implicitly. You may do errors, but still your very sincerity guards you. Point is, you must be ready to follow what you feel to be the higher will according to your best lights. Nobody is perfect. Always one learns by trial and error. And once we have the aspiration to be guided by that will, it becomes effective. But it is a question of constant application, constant cultivation. There are no charted programs like those for muscular exercises. Now here is an interesting question. Human relations, how can they help? Can they help in sadhana? What's their part, if they have a part, in the divine work? Human relations are there on purpose. In the divine scheme of things, relations, not only with human beings, but even with non-human forms, they are a part of the scheme. Human relations are intended to prepare a person for divine relationships, because the divine can be related to individually and collectively. It is not something in which you just merge and disappear. The divine is a person also, impersonal person. And it is only by developing and cultivating human relations Godward that you develop the capacity to have relations with God. Each one is given the material with which to test for oneself how far one can maintain relations in the right spirit. These relations, helpful or unhelpful, are intended to help the aspirant to correct himself, to mold himself, his nature, his mind, his very being, in such a way that he moves away from his self-centered ego and learns the art of identifying himself with others, giving himself to others. These are all preparatory grounds for surrender to the divine. Maybe some people will say that even family relations are an extended ego. True. But it is an extended ego, not the self-centered ego. In loving people around, maybe family relations, blood relations, one does expand one's consciousness to that extent. One is not wrapped up in oneself. It is to provide an opportunity and an incentive to develop this kind of non-egoistic consciousness, that this setup of human relations is provided for. It is a test whether we are really sincere in giving ourselves, in identifying ourselves with another. Unless we cultivate ourselves in the way of affection and love and friendliness and benevolence, how can we hope to have relations of devotion, adoration and love with the divine, who is not in front of us? Human relations are in the raw. Nobody can escape them. It depends upon us how we utilize them. Do we utilize them as feeders to our own ego, or as occasions to sublimate our egoistic impulses and learn the art of giving ourselves without expectation? It may be a blood relation, it may be a friend, it may be anybody, associate. Each one provides a testing stone, as it were, to our sincerity. To be spiritual means to be selfless, to be self-giving. And each person around provides a kind of touchstone to ascertain for ourselves how far we acquit ourselves. While on the subject, there is an interesting light thrown by Sri Aurobindo on a fairly common phenomenon that many of us face in life, particularly those who are designed to take to a higher type of life, who want to exceed the human parameters. They find persons who are developed, who are evolved, who are on the brink of leap, evolutionary leap, they will always find, mostly, not always, that in their immediate surroundings there will be always somebody who represents the exact opposite of what that person is. At every contact, you will be rubbed wrongly. That person, called the occult persona, he sums up the challenge to you. You have certain equipment, you have certain faculties, abilities. Now, the other person in your environment, maybe your wife or husband, an assistant, maybe a servant, anyone, but who has daily dealings with you, he will always have the opposite nature. And the tact and the ability with which you meet that challenge, learn lessons, and shape yourself, cutting your corners, that tests your progress. Almost all great people, and even lesser people, have this situation at some time or other in their life, as long as it is necessary from a spiritual point of view. Now that is another kind of relation which the divine provides for you to progress quicker. It is not open to a seeker of the integral path to say that I will have none of it. These are all secondary, illusory. I will have relationship only with God. It can't. It is not open. Now, with the person who represents the very opposite of your qualities, opposite of your standpoints, opposite of your nature, you have to learn to live. In doing that, you build a bridge, you grow in your understanding, you grow in your patience, and that's the purpose. For nature, higher nature, in keeping such a person in your milieu. That is another aspect of human relations. Often we hear, just so and so is a problem, everything against it. Now, the purpose is to educate you, to overcome your pet attachments, to see the other point of view, that there is another truth, appreciate the other person's standpoint and why the person gives. If you are very noble, you will have some companion or somebody who is very mean. If you are very meticulous, clean, systematic, you will be saddled with somebody who is very disorderly, disorganized, unsystematic. That's the challenge that is posed before you to perfect yourself in spite of such opposition and contradiction. You have to affirm your truth. That person also may consciously or unconsciously grows in such company. For us, on the surface, on the face of it, it may appear as waste of energies, as avoidable friction. We can change our partners, we can change our things, but the problem will continue in some other way, on some other level. So human relationships are a must, and we have to learn how to use them towards our higher evolution. To be selfless, to be loving, to learn to identify ourselves with others, to serve others without expectation. In other words, to exceed the human frame. They are testing grounds, helpful factors. They do have a part in the divine work, particularly in a project or work that is collective. You have to have relations with so many around you, and that is always on purpose. You have to come out of your shell, look things straight in the eye, and face the truth. All these problems can be avoided in the way of ascetic renunciation, but not in an integral path which aims at acceptance and perfection of life. What are the attributes constituting the work to be done for the goal to be reached? For surely each one should give and do one's way best. Yet it is, or it becomes difficult often, to put up with those ones, their own little or big world and ego. Put crudely, it is a question of friction of egos. But if the seeker learns to subordinate his ego, that is a spiritual culture, spiritual education. What the work demands, what the situation calls for, irrespective of my egoistic preferences. But if my colleague insists on asserting his ego, what do I do? This is a question that we have to ask Mother so many times. And mother's one answer was, give him a chance to learn. Yield. One day that person will learn. That's the art of collective progress, is always to subordinate one's whims, one's ego, and ultimately there is a kind of collective consciousness which regulates things and persons learn their lessons. Nobody is called upon to teach the others lessons. It is enough if one learns to play one's part without asserting one's ego. The next question is something that many ask. Physical intimacy with the mother is now a page from the poignant past, especially so for thousands who are now turning to Sri Aurobindo and the mother. We seek an inner intimacy with the unique consciousness that manifested in their lives. We may take a growing response to our aspiration as the sign of a relation, although perhaps the aspiration itself for a holistic, integral spirituality is Sri Aurobindo and Mother growing in us. However, we yearn also for human touches and yet have to guard against an imaginary conception of the mother. Could you please give some hints? Everything is true, but the mother came to give a personal relation, a personal human focus to our aspiration. It was the divinity lending itself to human seeking for relationship at a personal level. That manifestation does not lose its truth or cease its application with the withdrawal from physical form. The personality, the massing of the consciousness meant for that purpose continues in a pervading manner. It is up to us to awaken that human cord with the mother, with the divine, let's say. There are thousands today who have a personal, almost human relation with Lord Krishna, with Rama, with Jesus. Are they deluding themselves? No. That personality stays. We have to forge a link according to our specific nature, to commune with that personality. and that response. Incidentally, I came across a passage in a letter written by Sri Aurobindo some 55 or nearing 60 years ago to a small girl who didn't know at that time to write in English, to whom he wrote. He was a very small girl, maybe about 10 or 12. He wrote in Bengali. She is not here, she was not here, she was somewhere else. How does she come close to mother? How can she feel mother? So Sri Aurobindo wrote, you can do this. Shutting your eyes, you can imagine that the mother is in front of you. Or you can sketch a picture of her in your mind and offer her your pranam. That obeisance will reach her. When you have time, this is important, when you have time, you can meditate on her with the thinking attitude that she is with you. She is sitting in front of you. Doing these things, people at last get to see her. For us, luckily, we are not in the age of Rama or Krishna, but on the threshold of the 21st century, of technological age. We have so many photographs of mother, of Sri Aurobindo. And particularly speaking of mother's photographs, mother has explained that each photograph of hers captures that consciousness which was in the front at that time. So by concentrating upon that picture, you link yourself with that consciousness. And we have always found that there may be hundreds of photographs. There are some which evoke a response in us. I may thrill at the sight of a particular photograph. Others may leave me cold, or others may just evoke a sense of reverence from me. But that leap of my soul takes place when I see a particular photograph. Well, that is an indication that that is my channel. So I have to, if I am keen on developing that personal relation, we have I was mentioning that particular photograph has to be the focus. I will want to look at it again and again. Whenever I pass by that, whenever I see it, there is a leap of love, a leap of devotion. And through that picture, it is possible to form a personal link with her. She has allowed all these photographs to be circulated in order to provide ample means for the forging of personal relations with her. That's the meaning of these calendars, of these pictures. They are not there for decoration. They exude a power, a consciousness. If you are insensitive, no loss. But there is a reality and a power. Some time back, I remember, there was a lady who used to be possessed, and her husband took her to various places, gurus, with no help. Then one day, he came to the ashram and he happened to take a calendar. He hung it in his wife's room, not with any purpose, but just as a, somebody person, and he put it there. And since that day, there was no repetition, no deposition. So when he went to pronounce the tantric and report it to him, he said naturally, where her calendar is there, her picture is there, no such hostile element can enter. She is the Guru, supreme Guru of all tantrics like us. We know her power. I am speaking of power, but we should speak of love. But it is just in passing that I remember that incident. But what I wanted to say that these pictures, if we know how to handle them, if we know how to cherish them, if we know how to choose them, they have a potential of establishing the personal relation. There must be one which is a sure link. There can be others, but one must be predominant. I think there are still many more. We shall take it next time. There is one more session.